I'm Traveling John, and I'm going to travel and sketch. Join me on the adventure.
In our last adventure, we left Auburn and the foothills of the Sierra, traveled south through the Central Valley, and then back east up to Yosemite National Park and the Sierras. In this episode, we're going to be visiting the Mariposa Grove of big trees at the southern edge of Yosemite National Park. So here we are early in the morning, probably around 8 o'clock though. Sun's coming up and I'm in the beautiful Mariposa Sequoia Redwood Grove in Yosemite. It's the south part of Yosemite. It's a little drive away from Yosemite Valley floor, but it's well worth it because you get to see the majestic Sequoia Redwood trees in all their glory. Anyway, this is a grove we've just entered in. We're going to see more redwood trees, and then I'm going to try to decide on some redwood trees I'd like to sketch. We had a great time enjoying the Mariposa Grove of redwood trees in Yosemite National Park. And one of the things that really has always impressed me about the Sequoia Redwood tree is its bark. It has amazing bark that can be extremely thick, up to 1 or 2 feet thick. And this bark is almost like asbestos. So when a fire comes through, and it does come through this area in the past many times, the bark helps to protect the tree. And as you can see from this picture, as I scan up on the redwood tree, you can see the burned part of the bark. Although it didn't catch fire, it just got scorched. Some of the trees, if there's like a little crack in the tree, the fire can enter, and that's what causes some of the burning on the inside of the tree. And yet, in most cases, the bark will protect the tree, and that's one of the reasons why these trees live for thousands of years. They live so long. Anyway, to start with, I'd like to share this video I found on the internet. It's an old video, but it explains some of the very historic parts of of the Mariposa Grove. The Grizzle Giant is going to be my point of interest in this ink-line sketch and watercolor that I'm going to do. There's an old photograph of the Grizzle Giant. You can see with this man getting near it how massive it really is. That root is like a tree. And there's a new picture when I was in Yosemite at the Mariposa Grove. And this is an old picture or video of a tour bus on its way to see the famous Wawona tree in the Mariposa Redwood Grove. I'm going to read something from a plaque. Chosen for its pre-existing fire scar, it was tunneled in 1875 at the hands of the Scribner brothers, hired by the Yosemite Stage and Turnpike Company to create a tourist attraction. This human-made tunnel became extremely popular. For over 75 years, thousands of visitors on foot, horse-drawn stage, and automobile passed through the tree's core. While traveling through the heart of this tree, over 2,000 years worth of stories were exposed within moments. Weakened by the tunnel, it fell in 1969 under the weight of a heavy winter snow load. It now serves as a reminder of the past. That's how big it was, a man walking through it. And this is what it looked like when I was a young boy. I'm standing up there with my cousin, and there's 2 other cousins and my 2 brothers, and that's my dad driving his old Chevy station wagon through the Wawona tree. When I was up there this last time, I took a video of what the Wawona tree looks like today. Fallen over, you can see the big crack, and there it lays. As you heard, I was very impressed with the Grizzle Giant in the Mariposa Grove. It's a mammoth tree with big, big branches that are like the size of a tree in itself that stick out. It's not the tallest tree, but it's the biggest in that area. And I've done this sketch on an 8.5 by 11 that shows the composition that I'm going to be using for this. The Grizzle Giant is a middle in the distance, and then there's some larger redwood trees, sequoias in the foreground. I'm going to use this, I'm going to reduce it down to start with and put on an overhead projector to transfer it onto the 16 by 20 canvases that I'm going to do the black and white sketches on. That's the next. Oh, by the way, if you wonder how I do this, you can see some of my prior videos. For example, the one on the Palace of Fine Art is a good example. So that's the next step that I'm going to be going through in this video. This is my pencil sketch that I'm now inking in around the outline of the trees, the big trees. I'm doing it again with a rough line to give it the character of the tree itself. Of course, the tree is not smooth. And then I'm going to do some of the detail of the man that's leaning or lounging up against the side of the tree and enjoying the view. I'm putting him in right away because I don't want to accidentally draw right over him, and that would be a mistake. Now I'm working on the Grizzle Giant, Sequoia Redwood in the background. That is more or less my point of interest in this sketch. I'm doing the giant, and I'm saying giant branches that come out from that redwood tree. They are so large, they're like a big redwood tree in themselves. Of course, this is quite a distance away, and as I do this sketch, I'm going to try to give that feeling of it being a distance away from the foreground where the man is leaning up against the tree, and also I'm going to use a path to, there's a little path that's going towards the foreground there in front of the Grizzle Giant, and it goes up alongside the man, and that helps to give that feeling of distance. So I'm putting all the foliage in. Those needles on the Sequoia Redwood are quite a bit different than most trees of that nature, or pine trees, or fir trees. They're not long and pointed. They're a little bit soft and rounded. It's very interesting. And I'm putting smaller trees along the side of the Grizzle Giant. Again, to give that feeling of depth. The background trees, just really roughly putting them in with a dry ink marker. Put some little people in the foreground you might be able to see down on the ground. Again, give that feeling of height of that tree. Now I put in something in the middle ground there. Emphasize the path, working on a tree next to the giant sequoia, possibly a baby sequoia. This is to give it sort of a finishing edge to the piece of artwork. There's the path going by the man. Little sketchy lines. Another small baby tree. And a tree in between the giants. Just beginning to grow. Another tree to frame the right side of the illustration. That also helps the redwood sequoia to pop out on the edge of the inclined sketch. Now I'm going back to do detail on the roots of the tree, and in this case I'm using little dots. The roots down at the bottom do have a texture. They're not as rough as the upper trunk of the tree, but I'm giving the feeling of depth. Now I'm working on the actual trunk of the tree, and it's very interesting. It's very jagged. It looks from a distance sort of splintery, but it's amazing that the bark on this tree is so thick and strong that it can withstand a lot of the elements, from insects, disease, and even fire. That's one reason why they survive for such a long period of time. Some of the oldest trees in the world. Now I'm just finishing up that texture of the bark with strong, sharp lines. Smooths out as it comes out towards the bottom. Near the roots. Now we're just about done with the ink line sketch. There we go. So this is the ink line sketch on the canvas. And I just want to mention one thing concerning something I said earlier when I was doing the sketch, and I want to correct myself a little bit. When I said the bark is splintery, I do not mean that you get splinters in your hands. It's a nice soft bark. But when you look at it from a distance, it looks a little splintered because of the elongated feeling or look of it, and also that it's cut in certain areas. And comes out from the tree, so it looks like a splintering off. Now, after I do this ink line sketch, which is going to stay the way it is on canvas, I did a scan of it on my computer, and I made it overhead transparency. It looks like this. I'm going to place this behind some watercolor paper and proceed to do a watercolor of this area that I'm going to place with the scanned version of this illustration. And so if you would like to watch that process of the watercolor on the light table, I suggest you go to one of the earlier versions of my videos. For example, the Golden Gate Bridge is a good example, or the Palace of Fine Art. Either one of those will give you an idea of how I do that. So the next part of this video is going to show you my combining the watercolor that I did with the ink line sketch on the computer. So I hope you enjoy that process. This is the black and white sketch that you're familiar with. It's on my screen right now, and I'm going to start working with it in my Photoshop program. I'm going to show you next what the watercolor looks like that I did for the trees. There's the Grizzle Giant in the background, one of the absolute biggest trees in Yosemite National Park, and if not on the West Coast. Now you can see I've got some red in there on the redwood bark that distinguishes it. I am going to try to make it redder. Now I want to show you another watercolor that I did that I'm going to incorporate into this piece of work. There it is. Now you wonder, how in the world am I going to incorporate that into it? I'm going to take the trees off a second so you can see what I did. There's a lot of texture in that, and I'm going to make use of that. I'm going to make use of it in the tree, but I'm not going to make use of it in the bark. So my objective is to take it out of that bark area, but leave it in the tree area and leave it on the sides and in this area right here. Now that's the process we're going to go through. First of all, I took the ink line sketch, and you can see it's a little different at this point. I kept the black on the sides more or less, and I put more brown in the area where the Grizzle Giant is and on the bark area of the tree. You can see there's a little brown in this man down here that's leaning against a tree. By the way, that's supposed to be a self-portrait. I don't know how well I did it, but anyway, there it is. My wife helped me in that, took a little photograph of me, not there at the tree, but actually in our house, and I incorporated it into the sketch. Now, the first thing I did is I worked with the trees and the sketch of me. I added more red to the trees and brought it more into that redwood color. So I made selection of the man, and then I colored me, and then I colored in what I wanted to have color, and I lightened up areas. And again, that's just the background color I was working with. It's just this layer here. I didn't add another layer to get that color. I just altered it a little bit with the hue and saturation. And I've done that on other videos, and I'm not going to go through all the process of doing that, but if you want to see that, I would ask you to go to some of my other videos like the Golden Gate Bridge and see how I altered color by selecting it and changing it. Same with the redwood trees, same kind of thing. Now I'm going to once again view this and as it fits in the screen to go to the next thing that I did. By the way, I'm skipping some of the steps I normally take because otherwise this is going to be really long. So here's again the watercolor that I put in this area that covers the trees. Now, one of the reasons I did this is because I want to separate the composition from just flying off the top. When you do redwood trees like this, obviously it like points to the sky, and I want to stop that a little bit. So this is the process I'm going to achieve that. Not only that is a process I'm going to achieve some gradation or variation in the leaves in the giant grizzly redwood tree in the background. So what I did is I took that and I altered it to the point where I could achieve this. Now I took the color of that background out of the redwood trees, but I left it in where the tree is. Not only that, but I actually picked up part of it and put it up here in the larger area of the tree where it's growing to its maximum, and actually it grows further than that, and also in this lower area here. So I worked with that a little bit by copying it and pasting it and laying it in that layer. So the next thing I did was to take that texture, and if you recall, there was a texture going around that area. Again, it's like this. And I grabbed that texture, especially see how rough it is going around the bark of the trees, and I grabbed it and I used it and I placed it over the trees. So I didn't use a gradation, I just used the nice rough edging. So this sort of like this sort of image I have going across here helps again to stop the redwood trees from just flying off the composition. It holds it in its balance, and it gives it added interest as it's fading off the page there. I want to put color in that redwood tree in the background. There's the color I've added. That's a finished piece on that layer, but it is in color mode. And I want to show you what it's in the normal mode. That's what it looks like in the normal mode, where I actually put the green in it. Now we go back to the mode that is in color. It's the filter mode in Photoshop. There we go. After I've done that, I'm going to go down below and work in that white area below the green of the tree. And that's going to be a new layer. And I'm going to call this background trees. Okay, and I'm going to make sure it's on multiply. And I'm going to select that area because I already have a path. And I'm going to choose 3. Okay, that'll work well. And I'm going to choose a color. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a dropper tool to come in here and get some of this brown or tan. Now what I want to do is I want to add some color on these trees, but I want to keep a little bit of the intensity of the white, because that helps once again keep this element going that I want to, this compositional element going. I don't want to lose that. So, and I'm just going to go from the bottom to the top and add a little bit of color. And again, this is multiply, so it's not taking away the dots, the ink line dots. It's just adding a little bit of color to those trees that are in the distance. But it's not, again, conflicting with that compositional element of the colored band going across there. So, and I got the selection tool on, so this doesn't go into other areas. Okay, so now the other thing I want to do too is, you see these are all white, even though there's green in those trees and green over here and green a little bit here. I want to add a bit of green down in this area. So I'm going to choose some green. Again, it's going to be a little bit light, a little bit foresty color, somewhere in there. And I'm going to do a soft shade of green, almost like a haze in the background down in this area. See, let's see how this works. Okay, that's good. I just want a little. Okay, a little up in here, a little up in here, a little bit more, a little in the area. I'm going to hit that twice. A little in this area there to the right on the tree, and a little back in here, just to give a little effect there. Is I want to highlight the roots of the tree. So what I'm going to do, make a new layer again, highlight roots. Okay, now what I'm going to do is on these redwood trees, you know, these trees are so impressive. They have these big, gnarly roots. Not all of them, but a lot of the mature ones have these big, gnarly roots. And actually what it does is it reminds me of a huge, like, cat paw, just digging into the ground, holding up the tree. So I'm going to use the lasso selection tool. I'm going to set it about 40. And I'm going to select these areas. on the upper part, because I want to highlight those areas a little bit, as if the sun is bringing them out. I'm picturing these trees as being in the shade, but there's still light hitting these areas that are like giant paws. Let me see what I'm going to do. A little bit of an interesting swoop in this one, so they're not all exactly the same. Okay, so now what I can do is I can select that, edit, copy. Okay, we're going to paste it right there. Edit, paste. Okay, now you don't see anything, but it is on a layer. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten that pasted area that I just put there. So I'm going to get edit, transform, no wait, image, adjust, and I'm going to go to hue and saturation. Okay, so first of all I'm going to lighten it. See it coming out? Now I'm going to add a little saturation, and I'm going to change the value of it a little bit. No, it's too red. It's a little yellow. Yeah, okay. Going to lighten that up. It's a little too light. Okay, so that's the next thing I did. Now, what I want to do is the background ground in here I want to change a little bit. It's too flat. So once again, I made a selection for that. Hopefully I still have it. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I want to sort of soften the edges here and to make it look a little bit more in the distance, and I want to put a little more green in these trees. So let's go back to the paintbrush and just make a new layer, and we're going to set this to multiply so it darkens it a little bit. Now, if you see that selection tool, again, it's like the little ants, I don't have it going in the pathway because I want to emphasize that path and give it more of a perspective feeling, because this is my imagination of the path in the foreground, and this isn't going to the grizzly because the grizzly is so huge. So that's what I'm doing. See, I'm adding a little, just around the edges. There we go, like that. And then I'll add a little more green to where those trees are. And put a little green in those trees. Okay, one of the last things I want to do is I want to work on this path that's running by the man that's solemnly contemplating those beautiful, majestic redwoods. So we'll get the selection for that path. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to paste it in place. And now I don't have to do it this way. Fortunately, there's different ways of working with this, but this is one way I can do it. I'm going to take that layer. I'm going to image adjust. I'm going to go back down to hue saturation. And first of all, I can lighten it a little bit. Saturation, maybe put a little more yellow in it, lighten it a little bit more, make it stand out. Okay. See, all I wanted to do was make that path stand out some more. So I'm going to touch up things a little bit more, and I'd like to show you the finished printed piece. So that'll be coming up next. This just about wraps up the second of 3 vlogs that I would like to do in Yosemite. And to start with, I want to show you again the ink line sketch that I did of the big trees. And that way you can compare it to the color printout that I'm going to show you here. This is color print done on archival museum quality paper, and I like the way the red came out on the redwood trees. It really shows their true value. If you're interested in acquiring this print in color or the black and white print, which is the same size, you can go to Etsy.com and purchase one of those or two of those. And also the original Inkline sketch is available there. So if you're interested in any of those, please go. Now also, I would appreciate you visiting my website. And lastly, if you would subscribe to this channel, that would be great. That way you will be notified each time there's a new travel and sketch adventure. Thanks for taking the time to watch this vlog, and have a great day.